Most people don't realize they're aging too fast until it's too late. It doesn't begin with a fall, or a hospital visit, or a diagnosis. It often starts with something small, something quiet, something easy to dismiss. You skip one breakfast. You say no to a lunch invite. You stay seated a little longer than usual. And slowly, without anyone noticing, you begin to drift from living into fading. I've seen this happen too many times to count. Over 2 decades working with older adults in homes, in hospice, and therapy, I've watched people go from alert and steady to lost and withdrawn in just a few short months. And the most painful part? Their families didn't realize anything was wrong. Not until it was already happening. The signs were always there, but they were quiet, almost invisible. These are the 7 signs I've learned to never ignore after age 65. The first one is withdrawal. Not full isolation, not locking yourself in a room, but slowly, gently, pulling away from conversation. No longer asking questions, no longer commenting, no longer showing interest. I remember Helen, 72. She lived with her daughter and 2 grandchildren. She used to ask me what book I was reading, what the weather would be like next week, what her granddaughter had for lunch. Then 1 month, she stopped asking. She still sat at the table. She still smiled, but she stopped engaging. Her daughter said, "She's just tired." But I've seen just tired too many times. This wasn't fatigue. This was emotional withdrawal, and it often comes first. Her blood work later showed a critical B12 deficiency. It was treatable, reversible, but only because we noticed it early. Most families miss this moment, not because they don't care, but because it doesn't scream. It whispers. The second sign is fatigue that doesn't go away. Not the kind you get from a long day, the kind that follows you around, even after 8 hours of sleep, even when you haven't done much at all. I knew a man named Harold, 75, always early to our group sessions, always cheerful, always offering to help carry chairs or wipe tables. Then one day he came in, slower. He sat down and said, "I don't know what's wrong. I'm sleeping fine, but I wake up already tired." He stopped showing up the next week. Said he didn't feel like it. Everyone assumed it was just part of aging. But it wasn't. He had undiagnosed anemia and early signs of sleep apnea, both treatable. But because he said, "I'm just tired," no one looked further. So let me ask you, when was the last time you, or someone you love, said, "I'm fine" or "just tired," and you believed it? Sometimes those words mean something else entirely. The third sign is hesitation in movement. This one's easy to miss, because people don't always fall. Sometimes, they just start moving more cautiously. They reach for a table when they didn't before. They take a little longer to stand. They say, "I'm just being careful," but that carefulness often hides something deeper. Margaret was 69. She used to walk her dog every morning. Even in winter, even in the rain. Then one day she said, "I don't like walking in wet weather anymore." The next week, she skipped the walk again. Then again. Eventually, she stopped going outside altogether. When I asked why, she said, "I don't trust my knees anymore." But it wasn't her knees. It was her inner sense of balance, proprioception, beginning to fade. She wasn't in pain. She was afraid. That fear led to stillness. Stillness led to muscle loss. Muscle loss led to weakness. And weakness leads to falls. It always starts small. I've watched people turn 70 and live like they're 50. And I've seen others hit 66 and slowly start fading into the background. The difference was never dramatic. It was always in the small signs they ignored. The fourth sign is sudden irritability. A sharpness in tone. A quickness to anger, frustration over things that used to be fine. People call it grumpiness, moodiness, even personality. But what I've learned is this: when someone's world becomes harder to understand, they get overwhelmed. And when they don't have the words for that overwhelm, they get angry, Frank was a retired school principal. Calm, patient, respectful. Then one spring he started snapping at his wife. He refused help from caregivers. He lashed out over small things. Towels, dishes, hallway noise. It turned out he had both hearing loss and early cognitive decline. He wasn't mean. He was scared. And no one noticed because it came out as anger. So let me ask you this. What if the grumpy old man isn't grumpy at all? What if he's confused, or scared, or overwhelmed, but doesn't know how to say it? That's 4 signs so far. And if even one of them sounds familiar to you, I hope you'll stay with me, because the next 3 are even more important, and far more dangerous if we miss them. The 5th sign is when someone stops enjoying the things they used to love. Not because they're too busy, not because they're sick, but because they simply stop caring. This one is sneaky. It looks like a phase, a bad week, low energy, but when it lasts, it means more. Eileen was 75. She used to bake every weekend. Banana bread, shortbread cookies, coffee cake with cinnamon. Her kitchen always smelled like comfort. Then one month she stopped baking. She said, "I'm not hungry lately." No big deal, right? Except she also stopped listening to music, stopped dressing up, stopped setting the table for herself. She still smiled, but it wasn't real. She told me, "I just don't see the point anymore." We later learned she had low-grade depression. No big breakdown. No tears. Just a slow fading of interest. And fading interest is often the first sign that someone is beginning to let go. That's why this sign matters. It's not about cookies or table settings. It's about someone losing their internal reason to engage. So let me ask you, think of someone you love who's over 65. Do they still look forward to anything? A meal? A visit? A new book? A phone call? If not, that silence means something. And the longer it lasts, the deeper it goes. The 6th sign is when someone starts hiding physical discomfort. Not dramatic pain, not emergencies, but small, nagging issues they quietly endure. You'd be surprised how often this happens. Older adults start tolerating discomfort. Instead of talking about it, they say things like, "I don't want to be a bother. I can handle it. It's just age." But what they're really saying is, "I've stopped believing I matter enough to speak up." Ruth was 81. She had a sore knee for weeks, said it was stiffness. It turned out to be a joint infection. By the time we caught it, she needed surgery. She later said, "I didn't want to trouble anyone. Everyone's got their own problems." That sentence hit me hard, because it wasn't about pain. It was about feeling invisible. If someone stops mentioning pain, that doesn't mean they're fine. It often means they've stopped asking for help. And that is when decline speeds up. So here's something you can say to someone you love. You don't have to pretend. If something's bothering you, I want to know, because you matter. Sometimes that reminder alone can change everything. Now, the 7th sign, this is the one that stays with me, because it doesn't look like aging. It looks like stillness. It's when someone stops planning for the future. Not big trips, not retirement goals. I'm talking about the little things. What to eat next week. Who to call on Sunday. Which scarf to wear on Wednesday. Agnes was 89. She always had something on her calendar. A walk, a letter to write, flowers to plant in spring. One winter, I asked what she wanted to grow in her garden. She said, "I don't think I'll be here to see it bloom." She wasn't sick. She wasn't in pain. But she had started to disconnect from time itself. And when people stop thinking about tomorrow, it's often because they no longer believe they belong in it. That is one of the most dangerous signs of all. Because aging isn't just physical. It's emotional. It's psychological. And when the future disappears, so does the will to fight for the present. So let me ask you this. Has someone you love stopped talking about next week? Next month? Next season? Do they say, "I'll pass," or "You go ahead without me," more than they used to? If yes, don't ignore it. You don't have to cheer them up. You just have to remind them there are still things to look forward to, even small ones. A walk, a favorite meal, a new mug, a quiet sunrise, something that makes tomorrow worth naming. That's all it takes. If you're still here, feel free to leave your thoughts below. I read every comment carefully. 7 signs. Each one may look small on its own, easy to miss, easy to brush off. But when they start to appear together, they form a pattern. And that pattern is dangerous, because it leads to quiet decline. Not the kind that gets written into charts, but the kind that happens in living rooms, in kitchens, in beds that go unmade, in meals that are skipped, in conversations that never happen. That's where aging speeds up. Not in the body, but in the space where life used to happen. Let me tell you a story. Joan was 76. She lived in a quiet neighborhood, had 2 grown kids, and a little dog named Sammy. The first sign was simple. She stopped baking. Then she stopped calling. Then one day she didn't get out of bed. Her daughter said, "She never complained. We thought she was just slowing down. But when I visited her, she looked at me and said, 'I just don't feel like I'm part of anything anymore.'" She hadn't fallen. She hadn't gotten sick. She had just stopped. Stopped engaging. Stopped caring. Stopped showing up in her own life. It started with one missed breakfast, and no one noticed, because she smiled politely, said, "I'm fine," didn't ask for help. By the time we took it seriously, she was already slipping into depression and physical decline. And here's the hardest part. Most of these signs don't look serious. They look like mood, or age, or just tired, but they are early warnings, signals, opportunities to catch the drift before it becomes a fall. So what do? We notice, we pause, we ask better questions. Not just, "How are you?" but, "What surprised you this week? What are you looking forward to? When did you last laugh? Really laugh?" Because the truth is, you don't need to be a doctor to slow someone's decline. You just need to be someone who notices the signs and chooses not to ignore them. And if these signs are showing up in you, let me say something clearly. You are not weak for feeling tired. You are not a burden for needing support. And you are not invisible even if it feels like people stop asking. You still matter, and you deserve to be seen, to be asked, to be part of something. So take one small step. Say yes to one phone call. Go for one walk. Write one name in your calendar. Choose one thing to look forward to. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real. Because the fastest way to age is to believe you're no longer needed. But the slowest, healthiest, most graceful aging happens when you stay connected to others, to time, to meaning. So if even one of these signs showed up in someone you love or in yourself, please don't wait. Notice it, name it, reach toward it, today, not next year, not when it's too late. If this kind of reminder is helpful to you, you're always welcome to come back here. I'll be here. You're not alone in this.